In today's episode of Annual Pass, we learn more information about Halloween Horror Nights, the icons, the scares, everything you ever want to know about Halloween Horror Nights on today's Annual Pass. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Annual Pass. This is the podcast where we talk about all things theme parks. If it happens in a theme park, rides, shows, attractions, snacks, special events, anything like that, it happens here on Annual Pass. I am your host, Jack Pattillo, and of course, I'm joined always by my beautiful, lovely, and talented co-host, BK and Geoff Ramsey. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
I'm sad because Geoff.
I know. We have
Baby, come back.
rearranged a little bit today because we have a special guest on today, Geoff.
That's true.
We have Mallie on the show. Hi, Mallie.
Hi, Mallie.
Welcome.
Hello.
Mallie today is going to talk to us about Halloween Horror Nights.
Yes.
You are a lore aficionado when it comes to Halloween Horror Nights, right?
Yes, I very much am. It comes from me being a kid and growing up in Kansas and absolutely not being able to go to Halloween Horror Nights, but being deeply obsessed. So I would go down all of the rabbit holes and I would click everywhere on the websites back when websites had Flash.
Oh, yeah. All the ARGs and stuff. Oh, yeah.
I never got to do any of the ARG things, but yeah, I've always been a nut for horror. And I used to go to my home park. Worlds of Fun actually has a very much smaller scale version of Halloween Horror Nights, Halloween Haunt, and I would go every year. So this was like my dream of someday doing it bigger and better and finally getting to go to the mecca probably of Halloween Horror Nights.
Oh, man. Yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you today about Halloween Horror Nights. I have so many things. Real quick, though, let's get through some housekeeping. Don't forget, follow us on all the social media, Annual_Pass and Annual Pass Pod over on TikTok. And yeah, we got some stuff going up there pretty soon. We got some new stuff, not just like my news segments. We actually have some proper TikTok things, Geoff. There's an Epcot thing. It's super cute. It's me staring at an Epcot ball.
I saw it.
You saw it?
Yeah.
It looks cute. It looks
adorable.
good. It's going to be over on Annual Pass Pod on TikTok. And yeah, make sure to grab some stuff in the store. We have some new merchandise. We got our spooky merchandise coming soon. The I Survived the Annual Pass podcast t-shirt. Geoff, you wore that I think last week, right?
I did.
Yeah, you can grab that. It's going to be in the store. Also, our spooky icon.
Oh yeah, I'm
stuff
ready
is
for that
coming
one.
very. Apparently, it's in production right now.
That's exciting.
I'm Frankenstein. I think Geoff, are you Dracula? I think or. And we got Ben as Wolfman. Beaks, your Bride of Frankenstein. You look awesome with the sweet hair. That's going to be up in the store. Store.roosterteeth.com. Remember, all of that merchandise supports this show. So please, if you want to support us, grab some shirts and maybe grab 10 shirts for your friends and just spread them around and tell everyone to listen to Annual Pass Podcast as well. So, but thank you so much. Here we go. Mallie, let's dive into it now because we have a lot to get into about Halloween Horror Nights. I'll preface this by saying that I've been to Halloween Horror Nights twice. I went last year for Halloween Horror Nights 30, and I went in 2005 for Halloween Horror Nights 15.
So just like a couple years in between, right?
Yeah, just a little gap. But it's funny because there is, I'm sure you know all about this, but there is the Terra Queen, I believe is her name.
Oh, yeah.
And she only comes out every 15 years. And literally, I happen to nail the 2 times she's shown up. She was in I think she was actually the lead of Halloween Horror Nights 15.
No, so that is an interesting
Here we go.
thing.
Let's do this.
So
okay.
she was intended to be the lead of Halloween Horror Nights 15, and then marketing said, I don't know if that's going to sell. That's kind of like deep lore, and I don't know that we want to lead with sacrifices.
That's maybe you always lead with sacrifices.
Right, exactly.
Though, right?
I feel like you got to know what you're getting into. So they created the storyteller as their marketing icon, basically.
And it's the older grandma looking kind of woman. That's right, yeah, because I remember going through the storyteller house. It was horrifying. It was like a child's nightmare. And it was like probably the scariest thing I've ever seen at any haunted house ever, Halloween Horror Nights, anything like that, was in the storyteller's house. You round a corner, because you go in, it's like a Victorian kind of style house, and you go inside, you're wandering around. And at one point, you rounded a corner, and it was a hallway full of doors that were open away from you. And so you had to walk past them, and you couldn't see into them. That, for some reason, that was the most
sounds like trauma, Jack.
So what Jack is not filling you in on is the 15-year gap was because he had an accident in his pants at year 15. It took him a decade and a half to build up a lot of therapy to build up enough bravery to go back in. Was it the doors that caused the?
It was.
They also issue.
They did a thing too where they had at one point I think you went up a staircase, or there just was a staircase, and there was someone standing on on the banister.
Okay.
Literally on the top banister, like a little circle. They were standing on it, and they had a bungee cord attached to their back.
Good.
So they would lean down and get like
good.
face to face with you, and then spring back up. It was awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah.
I just realized before we get super into this, we should mention that Halloween Horror Nights started last week, September 2nd. So we're actually recording this the day before Halloween Horror Nights opens in Florida. But it is now open and available if you want to go to Halloween Horror Nights. I imagine we're going to mostly talk about Universal Florida because they do it really big there. But I'm sure there's some spillover for Hollywood as well. And I think Japan might even have its own lore, but we'll ask you about that. So Mallie or Jeff, do you have a question?
I do. Mallie, you said, I believe you said you're from Kansas?
Yeah.
And so if you're from Kansas and you're landlocked Kansas, very far away from Halloween Horror Nights, how did you discover it?
I think I actually grew up, I was in a military family, so I did spend some time in Key West, Florida. And so right before we moved to Kansas, our last thing was we went to Disney, but I guess it must have been around September because it was hurricane season. And I think we drove past some of the billboards when we were driving like up into Florida and then driving all the way up into Kansas. And I've always been like a huge horror geek. So for me, it was that thing that I was like 6 years old and there was no way my parents were ever going to take me. So I was like, I have access to the internet now. I'm going to look it up. And I just kind of kept up with it throughout the years.
I see.
Jeff, remember when you were 6 and had access to the internet too?
I was trying to think about that one too.
Carbon dating myself a little here.
All right, so let's dive into it. Let's talk about the lore of Halloween Horror Nights. So for those of you who might not know, Halloween Horror Nights obviously has been going for 31 years in Orlando. Technically more than that, but because of COVID and stuff, it's 31 years they've celebrated it. And there is a narrative that they've initially kind of started, just kind of had fun with it, and then they slowly started adding in these narrative elements to it where things carry over. So like last year we had Halloween Horror Nights icons, I think Unleashed, I think was the name of the house.
Captured.
Yeah. So we saw a bunch of different icons inside there. So, there's Chance, who's like the Harley Quinn kind of looking one. Obviously Jack the Clown.
He's the OG.
Yeah, he's the classic guy. And so they have tons of people. And so let's dive into it. Let's talk about sort of the upper level, the high level Halloween Horror Nights lore. Where do we even begin?
So I think you got to begin back in 2000 because that was when they had their first icon. Before that, it was basically like, oh, is there a movie that Universal wants to promote? Like The Mummy 2? Cool. The Mummy is effectively the icon, right? And then in 2000, at the end of 1999, they sent out a survey and they were like, what scares you the most? That was the big thing that they did. And clowns came ahead, like far and away the winner.
Yes.
So they decided to test this by being like, well, what if we made a clown the center of this event? And they unleashed him in Florida before the event even started. They just dressed up a guy like Jack and sent him to sit in a park.
Just a park, not even
just a park.
So not their theme park, just a normal park.
Yes, where families and children.
I'm trying to figure out where the parks are in Florida.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
There's actually, I think, a picture of him feeding the ducks out of a pond somewhere on the internet.
Ben, look that up. Find it.
I might be wrong. It might just be him sitting on a bench, and there were ducks who happened to be there. But
they were eating something though.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Ducks. And he tested so well with everybody, he literally broke into radio stations and interrupted broadcasts, which you cannot do now. But he was such a rousing success that they were like, oh, maybe like this is a thing we should continue to do for marketing. And so Jack is kind of where it all started. And it's interesting, especially because there was originally going to be another icon immediately after him, his brother, Eddie. And the problem was 9/11 happened and they had to tone down the gore. And when your main guy is a chainsaw guy, that's just inherently super gory.
Yeah.
So Jack came back that year and Eddie is considered one of the lost icons. He and Cindy, who is the caretaker's daughter. Caretaker was the next icon that kind of came into being. Real creepy dude. Exhumed bodies, weird stuff with that. I'm not going to go too into detail on that.
Like Gravedigger vibes?
Exactly.
Okay, got
it. Like
Bloodborne, got it.
Yeah, very Bloodborne. And his daughter was supposed to be one of the icons as well, but there were a string of child abductions.
That's gotta be so frustrating.
Right?
Like, all right, we're gonna do this horror-based thing. Let me play on your fears. Oh, sorry, world event.
Horrible.
Let's just change everything. We've got to figure this out.
So she's also considered a lost icon, along with the Terror Queen, who was the icon until she wasn't the icon, and she got her little Terror Queen crown taken away.
Aww.
Oh no!
Now she's just the Terra, like princess. I don't know what do you?
Yeah.
When a queen, Jeff, when a queen loses their crown, what is that called?
She's just back to Padme, right?
Padme.
That's true. That's true.
So how many icons like are there like total, just to like bang it out? Because you said like a bunch, and so I'm like,
I'm rapid firing.
Oh no, please. Let's get through. We got tons of information to get through.
We have Jack. We have the Caretaker. We have Lady Luck. We have the Storyteller. We have the Director. We have the Usher, and Chance. And Chance. So 7.
Oh,
yeah.
Chance is 7. That's convenient.
Well, we saw most of them last year, Jeff.
Who didn't we see?
Really?
The captured one.
Oh, and Fear. Fear was another icon. He's like the big bad of Halloween Horror Nights. Only comes out once every 20 years. He's one of the
every 20, some Eldridge stuff. This is
So he's come out once then.
Yes, he came out once and then again in Captured, because the whole theme of Captured was the lantern, which is actually where they retconned the lore to have started.
Yeah, and so we learned a little bit about the lantern last year when we got to go through a tour, and actually the RIP tour where we got to walk around, and we actually had someone kind of explaining stuff to us, but meanwhile we were being just visually and verbally assaulted by all of the stuff going on during actual Halloween Horror Nights. And so there's a gentleman by the name of Boris Schuster, who I don't know, was he just something? So there's a window. There's like at Universal Studios Florida, there are like they're kind of backlot areas that are dressed to look like different areas, and there's a New York area, and there is a private eye. It says Boris Schuster Private Eye. I don't know if that window was there, and someone for Halloween Horror Nights, like a writer, was like, we should use that name, and then developed a lore around just a fictional character who has now become a big part of the night. It's like, do you have any more information on Boris?
So I believe that sign existed well before Halloween Horror Nights did, and it was very much a like, oh, this is set dressing. And they built this thing called the Legendary Truth Collective around him. This really came to be in Halloween Horror Nights 18, the Bloody Mary one, where they were like, okay, great. This was founded by Boris Schuster, the private investigator who has his little place on the street in the backlot area. And he wanted to get to the bottom of this. He was a private investigator, and he found all this supernatural nonsense. And he was like, okay, cool. This is now my career, which is exactly what I would do if I encountered some supernatural nonsense.
Yeah. How do you get paid for that, though? Who pays?
Well, it doesn't pay great.
Yeah.
That's part of
I mean, I've seen Supernatural.
He wrote dime novels about it, and that's how he ended up paying for it. And that's the house that you guys went through, the Legendary Truth case files.
That's right.
Year.
Yeah. Which Legendary Truth, was it like... it was an acronym, right? CF. I forget what it was. Anyway, that was the one where so they have across from Boris Schuster. So if you're at Universal Studios Florida, if you see the Transformers ride, if you go to the right of the Transformers ride and kind of cut an immediate right,
there's a weird little alley.
Yeah, that little alley.
Yeah,
that I'm sure like the Blues Brothers will play kind of in that alley on the other end of it. That's where you see the sign. And not only that, across from Boris Schuster is the Kitty Cat Club, which is a big old like neon sign, and it has like flashing lights and stuff for the Case Files Unleashed. Case Files Unleashed. They actually recreated that sign inside the house, like a 1-to-1 replica of it.
Cool.
And we got to go into the Kitty Cat Club, which is pretty cool. And if I'm not mistaken, they're doing a whole house, because that was just one bit of a larger house.
Right.
They're recreating the whole Kitty Cat Club as a whole house this year, right?
I don't know if it's the Kitty Cat Club, but there is a 1920s speakeasy filled with witches.
Okay.
So that is kind of like where I'm thinking it'll either be the Kitty Cat Club or it will be something that probably Legendary Truth would investigate.
Yeah, that sounds fun. That type of house sounds enjoyable.
I think you're talking about the Spirits of the Coven house.
Yes, Spirits of the Coven.
Which is listed as a coven of beautiful flapper witches will lure you into their 1920s speakeasy.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Beautiful flapper witches.
Reveal their haggish true form and turn your Scream Squad into a witch's brew.
Ooh. That sounds fun.
Also, to a list of all of Boris Schuster's novels. In that house that we saw last year was Tears of the Tenement, Murder by Mannequins, Massacre at the Museum, Murder by Mossman, The Lustful Alibi, The Beast Unleashed, and Death by Dolly, I believe were all of them. There's a few others here listed, like Case of the Terrible Totems.
Jeff, you would read all of those.
I don't suppose those novels exist.
Yeah, I would love.
No, but I feel like I need to write them now.
Yeah,
I need
right?
like, please
Someone
hire
should.
me.
Yeah.
Someone should. Oh, man. So that's, I mean.
Oh, so also, they just announced yesterday, which I went absolutely crazy for. They have a vinyl
Yes, I
that
saw
is
that.
going to be the cases that Boris Schuster has gone into, and it will give a little bit more of that backstory and that lore. And the Midnight Syndicate is doing music, which they do a ton of music for Halloween Horror Nights in general.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping somebody either transcribes them or they put it on Spotify, because I do not have a vinyl record player, but I'm seriously considering investing in one just to listen to that.
Nice.
So you guys mentioned earlier that they retconned this to have all started with a lantern. I don't remember that. Could you explain?
Yeah, the whole
kind
lantern
of the genesis
and
of
the
this
icon situation. If you want to get into that, how does that all tie into everything?
So, like I said, in 20, it was 20 Years of Fear. And they basically said, oh, the Legendary Truth got this weird package that had photos with a bunch of symbols. And when they put the symbols together in the right order and kind of built the whole picture, there was huge clap of thunder over the art and design building at the Universal Studios kind of backlot area, and a lantern lit up. So the idea was that the Legendary Truth Collective had accidentally unleashed Fear, who had been biding his time and kind of waiting. And so they kind of retconned things to be like, yeah, he was whispering in everybody's ears before he could fully materialize that 20 years later in Halloween Horror Nights 20. And basically every single one of the icons was retconned to be a herald of it. And they each represented a different faction of fear. So like Jack was chaos. I think the director was Spectacle. Ben, I think you probably need to look this up because I'm going to embarrass myself if I keep trying to guess. And the idea was they were building up this huge torrent of fear that he could then feast on and take over the theme park. So that was Halloween Horror Nights 20. And that lantern was the facade that you saw in Icons Captured. So that's kind of the premise of it. That's where it started 20 years later after the event started.
So the idea was that house was like you going into the lantern?
Exactly.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's kind of cool. BK, what would you be the herald of?
The Herald of Mischief.
Ooh. I would be the Herald of Ramus.
You set that all up just to make that
Yeah,
joke.
just to make that joke. I feel
That
used.
Yeah. I don't blame it.
Well, that's funny. I mean, I could bring it into it because now I have a question.
Yeah.
Because there was a Ghostbusters house, and
Yes.
we've seen houses like that. There was a Beetlejuice house last year.
So it's all canon in the Lantern universe.
That's what I'm curious about. Like, how do they
Horror
fit
extended?
those sort of like one-off houses? Like even like this year they're doing the Weekend house,
Yes.
which. Looking at sort of what they're teasing with that, I could see how that fits in because that's much more like just kind of straight up sort of a horror. But how do you fit a Ghostbusters house into the narrative of Halloween Horror Nights or Halloween? Like these houses of characters we've seen in other media. How does that work?
So sometimes it's really well tied into the event, and I don't mean to dunk on Universal Studios, but sometimes it just isn't. It just flat out is not. And I think that last year's is probably a good example of it not quite being so tied in. Other than the concept of, oh yeah, these are all of your old favorites that you've seen before. But I will say that in 16, which was Carnival of Carnage, it was Jack back as the icon, and he is actually the only reason why they got Freddy Krueger, Jason, and Leatherface. And
Leatherface, that is the one I went to.
They tied it into the lore of that, saying that Jack was building this horrifying vision of his dreams and terror to bring them in. And so that was how they folded it into the story.
Okay.
That one also, am I tripping? Either I went to one or I went to two. I think that one had a Dead Silence house as well.
Yes.
Which was also like a popular movie that came out at the time. But like thematically, it fit in with the ideas of the horrors. My butt has never been so scared before in my life. Like that clown house, like I don't want to go back. No clowns. I'm good.
So what's the scariest thing for you? Is it characters? Is it clowns? Is it like being alone? Is it snakes like Jeffrey? Like
Well, yes
Jeff hates
and
snakes,
no.
by the way.
There's a lot. I just start with that. But I think the most is like demonic stuff, like possession, and I feel like clowns kind of are adjacent to that as well as like doll like horror. Like they are possessed creatures or like monsters, like things from another realm. When they get a little realistic, it's like I'm so good. Like I can't. The Grudge, that is real, bro. Like I'm not.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so good. Samara, you can have that TV. Like I'm out.
Oh man, last year they had a house. It was the Tooth Fairy, And that was actually like people didn't like that house.
I
thought it was great.
Awesome.
I mean, that was the first house we went into when we did our tour, and that one really caught me off guard. I was like, wow, that was really well done, and I love that. Like it kind of the idea was like you stepped into a fairy tale. So literally, the opening of it as you're walking in was like pages from a book.
Oh, how cool!
And then it started like black and white, like everything was black and white, and then eventually you kind of like took over. Like the idea was the tooth fairy comes for teeth, and if you don't leave out your teeth, they will then come for
That
you.
sounds like a movie
they'll
that
take
exists.
the teeth.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god!
And so it was like these people had masks with like bloody mouths. It was,
Oh no! Okay, yeah, no, I take it back. Teeth horror is the worst. No,
Oh, for me, it's eyeballs every single time because nobody ever does like a quick eyeball thing in
a
horror.
slow eyeball.
It's slow, and you have to watch, and you can just feel it.
Ben, you have an answer for something?
So I got two things. One, I have a warning for BK. Just watch out when you go to Halloween Horror Nights this year, because last year when I was with Jeff, I told him that my horror fear was like home invasion stuff. So as we walked into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house, Jeff just walked up behind me and went, good luck. And just stared at me the whole time we walked through. But some good info. The 5 icons were the 5 heralds of fear. So Jack the Clown represents chaos, the caretaker, death, the director, sacrifice, the storyteller, legend, and the usher, vengeance. So those are the 5.
So if those are the 5 main icons then.
Yeah,
but you mentioned earlier there were 7 because like fear only shows up every 20 years.
Well, it's like
technically 8 because Lady Luck was for 21, obviously like blackjack themed. And she, I don't know why people aren't super into her. I think maybe the houses weren't as strong that year or something. But the idea was she would give you your wish, but make it horrible. Monkey paw style.
Okay.
Exactly. So she was this like, normally when you first saw her, she's this gorgeous redhead in a green dress and she's tempting you into everything. And then she gets real ugly as soon as your situation turns ugly, basically.
Just basically like that.
My first marriage.
And then Chance. So how come Chance wasn't part of that as well? Like when did she pop up?
She did not. I think she was a sidekick in Carnival of Carnage, if I'm remembering correctly.
Ben is nodding his head. So
yeah, she was a sidekick in Carnival of Carnage because there was a stage show where Jack did a murder on a few people. I'll put it that way.
Do some murders. You know?
Yeah. And she was the sort of Harley Quinn manic energy support cast, and she ended up being an icon much later. I don't remember which year it was, but it was after 20 for sure.
So does it then basically just go like on a 5-year cycle where like do you get Jack every 5 years as the main icon, or like how do they determine
even this year there's not really an icon this year as far as I can tell. It's kind of just a like it's Halloween Horror Nights
is the marketing kind of point, because for a while the icons really were a marketing thing, and I think that's also why I'm so interested in it, because that's what I do for my day job. I do marketing stuff.
Jack's back. That was what you always say. Jack's back.
Yeah. And I think it really depends on the strength of their IP houses versus the strength of their original houses. Okay. If they get a ton of really, really strong IPs, they're probably not going to lean too hard into the icons because they want, like, I mean, The Weeknd is huge, right? Yeah. But I do think that for the big anniversary years, that's when you really tend to see those icons come back through.
Yeah. 31 isn't exactly the biggest, like, well, we're going to go nuts.
I mean, 31 Days of Halloween, and that's kind of that's the theme behind it. That's why all the scare zones are very traditional, like witches and pumpkins and trick-or-treating.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to Annual Pass. And we're going to take 1 second to tell you a little bit about our sponsor today, which I'm a big fan of. It's 30 Morbid Minutes, and another awesome podcast from Rooster Teeth. Do you ever find yourself awake in the middle of the night reading real-life stories that make your skin crawl? The creepy history behind Victorian nursery rhymes, or tales of sleep paralysis demons? That's horrifying. Perhaps you've seen the haunting images of corpses on Mount Everest, read the last meal request of death row prisoners, or experimented with seances on spirit boards. If you've ever wondered, hey, what the heck exactly is necro-cannibalism? I'm wondering that now. Then 30 Morbid Minutes is the new podcast for you. Hosted by Elise Willems and Jessica Vasami, each episode investigates a new topic ranging from the macabre to morbid to downright creepy. Sourced straight from history and the headlines of today. Give it a listen. It's a little bit more intense, so maybe if you got younger listeners, maybe I don't know about that one. Maybe give it a listen first and then let them listen to it. But it is absolutely fantastic. You can subscribe right now on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes every Tuesday and Mondays for RT First members as well. So give it a listen. Tell them we sent you their way and enjoy 30 Morbid Minutes. Now, back to the show.
All right, so we've mentioned the icons already, and like we know, I mean, everyone knows Jack. Everyone loves clowns, and so we have the main icons, then we have the lost icons, like you said, like the Terror Queen was a lost icon.
Eddie.
Yeah.
So let's go through kind of just like one at a time, kind of like top level on all the different icons. Obviously, we know Jack because we saw him last year, but like I'm curious about like the director and the usher and all those guys.
Yeah, so first it was Jack, and then the following year it was maybe going to be Eddie, King of Chainsaws, Jack's brother. 9/11 happened, bad news, bad vibes. So then I believe right around that time they moved into Islands of Adventure. And that was when the Caretaker first appeared. And the Caretaker, gravedigger, really creepy dude with long white hair and a big old top hat. And he, the theory was that his house had kind of burned down and his daughter had escaped. So she was going to be the icon for the next year. Only Cindy Kane, poor Cindy Kane, she's actually been lost twice. She was supposed to be icon in two separate events. Yes. But, things happened in the real world that made it impossible. So I believe that year they didn't really have an icon. I might be wrong on that. And then in the following years, they were still in Islands of Adventure. And then we had the director, who's Paolo Ravinsky is his real name. And his whole thing was he filmed snuff films. And Universal didn't realize that was what he was doing. So they hired him to film a horror movie. And the premise of that Halloween Horror Nights was that you were in his movie. He was, killing everybody there. Yeah. So then following that, I believe we maybe had a few more back and forths. We had the storyteller, though, who the premise was every single house that was in the park was a story that she was telling to people, and kind of an experience that somebody had being read a story by her. And, she looks like this nice old lady. And later on, actually, last year in the Icon's house, they went more into that almost backstory, and you saw this really awful like shadow monster where like you see the nice old lady shadow and then she just completely transforms into this horrifying demon.
Yeah, that confused me because I don't remember that from 2005 when I went, and now it's like, oh yeah, she morphs into something evil, and I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So do we know at what point they realized that they were like, did they set out to build a universe of lore at Halloween Horror Nights #1? Or did they realize they had kind of caught fire and people were starting to, I guess, like get attached to the characters and want more? And so they then started to retcon and sort of build this out because of audience demand? Or was this a grand plan from day one? Do you know?
Definitely not a grand plan from day one. I don't think anything about Halloween Horror Nights for the first one was a grand plan. I think it was more of an experiment to kind of see how people responded. Yeah. And it's interesting. Some people argue whether or not he was actually an icon, but the host of Creepshow actually appeared in kind of some of the first 10.
The Crypt Keeper.
The Crypt Keeper was in a couple of them. And it really was more of that like, we have this license, we'll just have this character and kind of be the forefront. And like Jack was the first time they created something super original and built an entire backstory for him that didn't come prepackaged in that IP box. And I think that that's really where it started. And they were like, we'll see where that goes. And then as things went on and these icons and these stories and these backstories became so beloved and people were so interested in them, they kind of kept doing it because once you build that story, it's something that keeps people coming back year after year.
Yeah, I think more so than anything, that's probably it. It's like last year there were a couple of houses that were literally throwbacks to previous houses, and we're seeing that more and more. Where it's like you're seeing elements of older houses or even continuations of houses, where it's like, oh hey, remember that one? This is the sequel to it. And so I think they're playing up the idea of like bringing like, hey, you went this year, come back. Like the Terror Queen was a thing where I was like, oh my god, I remember her, and now like she came back 15 years later.
So I was asking it because it was as a leading question, because I'm kind of fascinated by world building in general. It's like my favorite thing, and it's what I've loved the most about what we've been able to do at Rooster Teeth, and in our own dumb way.
World building is world building.
It is. It's world building. It's fun. It's like it's breathing life into a universe that you create. It's so much fun. But typically the way this goes in popular media is when you create a product and it resonates with an audience, and then the audience kind of identifies with it in a way that maybe you hoped for but you never dreamed of, and then you realize you've kind of caught fire. You expand and expand and explode, and you have Transformers starts as a toy, and it ends up as a series, 16 Michael Bay movies now. So have the horror icons ever broken out of Halloween horror and appeared in other pop culture? Like, is there a plan to make a Jack movie, or do they have cameos in other Universal films or properties? It just feels like they've got this clearly very passionate audience who consumes as much of Halloween horror as they can and looks forward to this event every year and plays the ARGs, and there's like a real fandom to this thing, and Universal is not one to not take advantage of fandom. So have they?
They haven't. And that is, I think this record is really kind of the first transmedia thing that I've seen where they are putting lore out into the world, mostly independent of Halloween Horror Nights, you know? I would die of joy if they had a Boris Schuster movie. I feel like that could be a franchise and a half.
I take a series, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Like each episode, anthology series, do it up. Every episode's a different icon, but there's a low-key overarching thing to the final episode. Breaks the fourth wall, and it's a story about being in Halloween Horror Nights, and it's real.
There you go.
Well, I mean,
HBO Max, get on that.
Get on it.
Let's make it happen.
Freddy's Nightmares was an anthology-style show that barely had Freddy in it, and he was just a framing device, and the storyteller is such a natural fit.
Yeah, I think Friday the 13th, the series was kind of similar, right?
Yeah, it was a haunted antique shop.
Yeah.
And it was like people bought these antiques and then they messed up their lives in some ways.
It's like needful things. Just like, open up a shop, have little stories.
Yeah, it just seems like it's rife for an animated series similar to the Animatrix.
Animatrix. Oh,
Cool.
Another anthology series.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just surprised that they have 31 years of world building and like intense fandom.
Yeah. I mean,
sure.
The backstory for Jack alone is easily a movie. I mean, our friends over at Yesterworld, they actually made like a really long documentary all about Jack and like his sort of forming and everything. If you're on YouTube, check it out. It's fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I love, because like when I went in 2005, it was definitely like, hey, we have haunted houses, we have some scare zone, but there wasn't really, it didn't like feel like it was all tied together. Like you'd kind of like wait in line and they have movies showing, kind of spook you out and stuff like that. But now you go and they transform the park. It's like you step into that park after they Halloween Horror Nights begins. It's a whole different world, and that to me was probably the most fascinating thing, because like you just looking like Mel's Drive-In is now Mel's Die-In. It's like that's so great, and like the noise and like the fog, and it's just the way they do it is spectacular.
It's also awesome to watch the transition if you're in the park when it goes from daytime to nighttime, and you watch it unveil. Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's all the lights slowly kick on, the fires start going, and then all the scare actors come out. It's so impressive how they pull that off, and the logistics that go into it, because the amount of scare actors and people working in the houses that they must have that are only there for that specific thing is incredible.
Yep.
And you got to think too, and like Universal's not the only group that's doing this now. I mean, like SeaWorld has a thing, even like Disney has Not So Scary, but still, it's like they have additional stuff going on, and so. How many people live in Florida that work in these parks?
Yeah.
Right?
It must be what it would be like to be in a real horror movie story, right? Like you go to the theme park, you have a wonderful day, you're eating your churros and riding all your rides, and the sun sets, and then there's smoke everywhere, and suddenly there's aliens poking you with guns and chainsaw dudes running around.
It's so cool. I love this stuff. I mean, I love theme parks in general, but the idea of transforming a theme park into something you're not used to is such a cool idea, and they've really embraced that. And yeah, I'm excited. I love the idea. Well, I mean, when I went in 2005, they had it at both parks. So literally, they had probably the creepiest scare zone I've ever seen, because at Islands of Adventure, so now it's mostly focused on the studios. Like they sort of have like a template they just sort of use every year. This year's a little different because they moved the house behind Men in Black over to Fast and Furious.
Okay.
Because they thought they weren't going to be able to use it. That's all. I'm sure we can talk more about that. Yeah. But when I went, it was at Islands of Adventure. And at one point, there was a scare zone in the comics area. And so like the real fun kind of kiddie comics area, they filled the whole thing with fog and smoke, and then had like these lasers that was like kind of like a laser wave, maybe about like 10 feet up in the air. So it made these like clouds of like green and red. And then they had scare actors wearing black and white costumes that had like long arms, and they were on some of them were on stilts.
Yep.
And they would hide in the fog and just appear in front of you. And it was the most terrifying thing ever.
I want to be the one that's doing the scaring. I want to be that person. But I always wanted to as a kid. There were like tons of auditions and stuff like that, and they do it every year because I lived in Florida for a while. And I was always so scared because like everyone does it and it's not easy. Yeah. And I was like, well, how do you train for that? Is there a process? Like, is there a school to be a scarer?
You have to
like,
contort your face.
That's
in
what
certain
I'm saying.
ways.
Like, because I'm not good. That would scare the life out of me.
It's funny. My like millionaire win the lottery dream is to open up a haunt myself someday. So I'm really fascinated by the mechanics of it too. And for a lot of people, they actually do scream training. Like they there are people who will take voice lessons with metal singers to like be able to scream
and protect
properly.
Your vocal cords. Yeah.
Exactly. And then there are actually some people who will spend all year conditioning for the season so they can like freak out and like throw their head back and stuff like that. It's wild.
I'm not worthy.
Now, Jack talked about the scariest scare zone he's experienced. Has there, to your knowledge, ever been a haunted house or a scare zone that went too far, where they were like, okay, we're not going to bring that back anymore? Like we crossed the line, or not even crossed the line, just people were too scared by this thing, so we can't. We just have to leave it.
Real quick, before we dive into that, we should explain. So there's haunted houses, which are the ones you go wait in line for, and you go through a house. So it's like a contained scare area. But then the scare zones are essentially in the park. There's certain areas, if you walk through it, there's just stuff happening. So it's just in the park at all times.
It's just to fill the gap between haunted house to haunted house.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what a scare zone is. If you're
it's immersion, Jeff. Okay.
Well, yeah, that's what you're doing. You're being immersed. So you go from one haunted house to another. You don't have to leave the immersion.
It's also great for people watching because, especially the people who you think are going to be the toughest or who aren't paying attention, they got so good. It's so wonderful.
Well, you got to figure the targets are like the big burly guys or like the scaredy cats. You know, it's like, okay, those are the ones we want to go after. So
no, I mean,
Beaks, we're gonna have fun with you.
Don't wear pigtails like I did when I went.
Oh no, yeah, I am gonna be one of those obnoxious people. My boyfriend is 6'7", and we went last year, and boy, they were on him constantly. Oh no! But it was amazing because in the it's the Haunting of Hill House. He was not expecting the tall man ghost because nothing's ever taller than a dude who's 6'7". And so one of them looms out and kind of like takes its claw and almost boops him on the nose. That man almost bent over in half, and I have never, he's not a flexible guy. So it was fantastic. But to your question, Jeff, I don't think anything has been necessarily like, oh, we can't bring that back, other than in the comics area, there was a year where they had Maximum Carnage, where Carnage, the supervillain from the Marvel comics, took over. Awesome. And there were reports. It's all very much myth and legend at this point because nobody has any pictures of like beheaded superheroes and like iconics. Marvel was not happy, to say the least, and this was even pre-Disney. So that one will never be coming back ever.
I was gonna say, it's funny because like I want to bring up my favorite house, and then we can talk about that for you. But my favorite house I've ever been on was during that year in 2005. They had a biker bar. It was the coolest thing ever. It was like so it was dressed up to look like a bar from outside. So you were waiting in line like to go into this bar, and they had this one prop out front. It was like this guy over a barrel, and he was just vomiting as the barrel. And he'd be like, oh, and just like throw up into it, and it was keep doing that over and over and over again. But you went inside and it was like an actual bar. So they had a bartender and she would like yell at you and stuff, and they had like a band playing or something. You went through the toilets and they were all disgusting and it just smelled horrible. And ultimately at the end, I think it was like the devil was at the end. It was like this big dude with red wings.
This is your favorite house?
It was so cool. It was such an awesome house.
That's the one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Jack's like, oh, this got thrown up outside. It was awesome. It was awesome. Bartender yelled at you.
I have good news for you.
Friday night.
You can just go to 6th Street and have the exact
same. Thank you. Hit up 36. What's up, Ben?
I looked at the details on the Maximum Carnage horror house. Just for details, villains such as Zorn, Scream, and Mephisto appeared throughout the house attempting to slaughter guests.
Mephisto.
Yeah.
The Punisher, formerly an extremist vigilante waging a one-man war on criminals, wields a flamethrower at the exit. Infected with Albert Kane's darkness, he joins the Caretaker and Carnage to burn as many people alive as he can. One room featured mini laser pointers pointed at guests, representing the supervillains, using them as target practice.
Yeah.
After the event ended, Marvel got angry with Universal, saying that if kids came to the event and saw all of their favorite superheroes dead, they would stop buying Marvel comics because they would think that the superheroes were dead for real.
What year was that?
That is true.
Because of this, Universal has never had a Marvel-themed house or scare zone again.
What year was that? Can you tell?
It looks like it was 2002.
Oh, wow. So that would have been early, like the second or third big year.
I think Marvel Zombies would be a good house, though, and that's canon for What If. So maybe we'd see something like that come back.
I think, unfortunately, because the mouse now has control of Marvel, we're not going to see. We're not going to see any big agreements.
Girl
between
can hope.
Universal.
Yes.
For reference, the houses this year are, we've mentioned it before, The Weeknd, Halloween, a Blumhouse twist that features a Black Phone and I believe Freaky. Wolfman versus Dracula versus the Mummy.
Yeah.
Spirits of the Coven, Bugs Eaten Alive. Chupacabras, Hellblock Horror, Dead Man's Pier, Winter's Wake, and Descendants of Destruction. And then the 5 scare zones are Horrors of Halloween, Scarecrow Cursed Soil, Sweet Revenge, Graveyard Deadly Unrest, and Conjure the Dark.
So are there any icons?
No.
I mean,
so
Lil Boo would be like the one icon.
Lil Boo is the love of my life. It's a tiny little pumpkin that I think has appeared a few times, like a few events, but last year everybody took pictures of it. It was in this big tunnel entrance to
Wicked Growth.
Yeah, to Wicked Growth, the pumpkin house. And people took pictures because it's this really cute little tiny pumpkin. And this year they're kind of putting the Pumpkin Lord on a lot of marketing, but he's not technically an icon.
Okay.
They did something similar way back when with The Patient, where he was never an icon, but he was featured super heavily in all of the marketing.
Lil Boo's adorable. I'm showing photos of Lil Boo.
It's so cute.
Yeah.
Apparently, Lil Boo started as a joke tweet from a team member previews for the year's Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Orlando and exploded into an internet sensation.
Yeah,
Incredible.
So apparently it was like they were doing team member previews, like showing off the houses and stuff, and someone took a selfie with Lil Boo behind him and said, "This is my favorite. He's mine." And then they tweeted that, and then Universal or Halloween Horror Nights has a great Twitter account.
Yeah.
They're very, very snarky on their Twitter
awesome.
account, but they just responded with, "That's Lil Boo." And that was it.
And that's it.
And that became a thing. And then like they ended up taking Lil Boo and like putting him in like the big like medallion at the park as you went in, and like it just became this running thing, and it sort of went viral. And I got to give Universal credit because they kind of leaned into it. They're like,
That's
"Oh,
awesome.
let's have fun with it," as opposed to like now like they're kind of, hopefully they're not going to go too over the top with it. Like this year I think is maybe the Lil Boo year because again they don't really have an icon, so it's like, let's have fun with it. But I don't imagine, Lil Boo will continue being huge in the park. It's not going to be the Baby Yoda of Halloween Horror Nights where they just like slap Lil Boo on everything. It's like, we got Lil Boo. It's like, no, let's just do it once and then we're sort of done. So
I have 3 questions.
I love it.
One, what was your favorite house?
Oh man, that's tough. I loved The Haunting of Hill House. I really, really did. I feel like if you're going to take an IP and put it into a house, that is the gold standard for how you do it every single time. Like the scares all hit. It was really well designed, and I felt like I was in Hill House.
Okay, cool.
that's cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's how I felt about Wicked Growth, actually.
Wicked Growth, that
and
was
Bride of
fantastic.
Frankenstein, for that matter.
Yeah, I think Bride of Frankenstein told the coolest narrative.
Yeah.
I mean, Beetlejuice was great because I grew up on Beetlejuice and I loved it. I mean, it was
That's
basically
awesome.
walking through the movie.
So jealous.
But Haunting of Hill House had that pitch black area. That was probably the most freaked out I was at all of Halloween Horror Nights. Like anytime I don't know where I need to go and I can't see anything.
Yeah.
So there was a whole bit where literally it was just darkness and it was just noise around you.
Well, and so what they did is it's like a sound blackout room too. So all you could hear was the sound that they were pumping in. It was like you walk in and it's silent, and then you step in a little further and it's the scene where one of the kids is stuck in the little, dumbwaiter area. And so you walk into the kitchen and you hear the person screaming at the top.
Yeah.
And then you actually hear the person really screaming like you're stuck in the dumbwaiter too.
Yeah.
It was very effective.
That was probably the most uneasy I was at all of Halloween Horror Nights last year. But I think Wicked Growth. So Wicked Growth, there was a point where you're walking through, like, it's supposed to be like outdoors and there's a fence next to you. But you couldn't tell the fence was actually like these rubber things. It wasn't wood.
Yeah.
And so like a scare actor would burst through it.
the wood.
Yeah.
Yes.
It would look like wood. It was like, oh my gosh.
Did it scare you?
No, it didn't scare me. It was
But it
just
was awesome?
It was
Okay.
many things scared me. I'm not
Yeah.
brave, but it was
Okay.
just it was just really cool.
Yeah, I think they did that once or twice in that house, but nowhere else, which is a little surprising. Like, that's such an effective scare.
Well, I feel like if you use it too much, though, everybody expects it. Like, nowadays, everybody expects a boo hole where you're walking down a hallway and you're kind of looking to your left and your right to see if there's any little cutouts that somebody's going to, like, take a window down and, like, scream at you.
Yeah,
you know?
I think, like, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre had a bunch of those.
Oh, yeah.
That was probably one of my favorites. I had two. The Texas Chainsaw, when I went, I don't know, I was terrified of the chainsaws. That was the reason why I didn't want to go.
Were you familiar with the movie at that point? Okay.
I was big. And then that was the year where they had all of the movies. So I was really excited because I knew everybody there. Like, I knew Freddy. I knew Leatherface. But not to mention the scare zones of people walking around with chainsaws. Like, I thought I'd be desensitized. They go in and they do, like, the scene at the end with the sheets. I think it was more based off of the remake than the original. But that's a really iconic scene in the remake. And there were, like, 4 big broly guys looking like Leatherface. And when the sheets move, they had timed it where they would disappear and reappear. Bro, I was so excited because I knew the character. My friend, who was stone cold the whole day, sprinted to the end from that scene. I ain't never seen her move so fast in my life.
You know, if you're a big Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan, we can take you to where to the house.
Yeah,
it's
like 10 miles away.
It's not that far.
Yeah.
It's
That's haunted.
Northwest of Austin.
Have fun, absolutely not.
I used to drive by it all the time when I was in the Army, and I'd have to go from Austin to Copper's Cove.
I'm a black woman. I am not going there.
You'll be safe. You'll be with Jack and I.
That's what they all say.
Well, we'll be pushing it in front of us. So that's fine.
We're in an era of deconstructionist horror, so you will be safe.
Because that's where you're right, guys.
Plus, you're with 2 middle-aged white dudes with beards. There's nowhere we can't go safely on Earth.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And you can definitely outrun them, I think.
You know what?
Easily outrun Jack.
Sacrifice
Yeah,
it.
you can sprint.
Take them. They have more flesh.
Yeah, I'm trying to say, but of the 3 of you, I think PK has the big final girl energy for this thing.
Oh, totally
Yes.
agree. Totally agree.
Oh,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
my
Jack and I
gosh.
both have one foot in the grave already.
Yeah.
So, second question: are you going this year?
No, I'm not. As far as I know, if I can find good plane tickets and I can find good hotel stuff, I would love to go, but I splashed out. I did like the RIP tour and all the behind the scenes stuff last year because it was a banner year, and this year I was like, I should probably like save some money.
Yeah, no, that stuff adds up pretty quickly.
Oh my God. Once you do the RIP tour, it ruins you for everything. I'm sure it's the similar for you guys at like RTX where you just get to walk in and you don't ever have to wait in a line and you're just delivered and you get to go first.
Delivered. So fancy.
Yes, ding dong. Special delivery.
I'm like, hello, peasants.
Yeah,
And there's like a guy who's like, now we're going to take you to this haunted house, and then here's the backstory. It was awesome.
Yeah, so the RIP tour basically is a guided tour where you have a literal tour guide who has maybe about 10, 15 people who he'll take around, or he or she will take around to the actual house. Like, they'll walk you right to the front. You go in, you don't wait in line.
You get in ahead of the express passes.
Yeah, they literally set you in, and then like when you get out, they're waiting for you at the end. They take you to the next house. They have we got to go to like private lounges and hang out.
We got to see cops arrest people for fighting behind the scenes. We got to do a lot of that.
Oh, the lines are wild there.
But we got like VIP seating at the it was a
the stage
wildfire.
show. What did you think of the stage show?
Oh my gosh. I grew up doing musical theater and stuff, and I do ballroom dance. And so anytime there's a dance show, I'm super in. I know I'm probably the minority at a lot of Halloween horror nights, but it was a magic show, and it was a dance show, and it was a contortion show, and it was a pole show.
Music.
It was incredible. They started off with the Steve Aoki remix of Black Parade, and I was like, oh my God, I'm in.
Yeah.
I think my soul left my body and didn't return until I was walking out of the stadium, and I was like, I just had a spiritual experience.
Yeah, that replaces the Bill and Ted show.
Yes.
So like Bill and Ted, obviously the classic characters from the 80s and 90s, like they would do a stage show where basically it was them riffing on pop culture. So it was like pretty much anything big in pop culture. They had like a 30-minute stage show. Well, it was just them kind of like goofing around, having fun with it. And it was apparently, I never got to actually see any of the shows, but apparently they were fantastic. And this was sort of the new replacement for us. Like, we're doing a new thing.
Bill and Ted who? That thing, I would have paid.
Alex Winter was involved with almost all of them. Too.
Well, what else is he doing? I would have paid the entire. Well, we didn't have to pay anything because
Universal was very kind.
Yeah, they were kind to us. But I would have paid the whole ticket, the RIP tour ticket, whatever it costs, just for the stage show.
There is a sequel.
So good.
There's a sequel this year to the stage show. It's the same
We're
performer.
going, right?
I hope so.
Was it always the stage show? Because I have this weird memory of seeing Rocky Horror Picture Show.
They also had that.
Okay.
Yeah, so they've gone through a few different shows and variants and stuff like that for I think a good 5 or 6 year stretch. They did have a Rocky Horror Picture Show tribute.
Awesome.
And then oftentimes that would be alongside an icon show.
Okay.
So
Jack definitely had a big icon show.
Okay.
So last year's show, the name of it is Halloween Nightmare Fuel.
Nightmare.
Yeah.
This year, it's Halloween Nightmare Fuel Wildfire.
Oh, God.
And just
that's
the
great.
description is the show that sparked a firestorm last year is ablaze with a new nightmare. The pyro and aerial performers are back to reignite your fears.
I want to go just to see you see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool.
You're gonna be like just melting in your seat.
Oh my God.
Like it's one of those things where they say that they're like the show is overwhelming, and the fact that you don't know where to look. There's just
Okay.
so
It's
much
kinda like
stuff happening. Like you can watch like the two guys in the background are having a whole story that you will miss if you're looking at the woman next to you who's like bent into a pretzel. It's like what?
It's very much like watching Cirque du Soleil, where you realize
Okay,
I had to
that's
see
what
it
I was
3 or
gonna
4 times because I missed so much. My third question was, so what's going on in the other Universal Studios? Are they replicating this? Do they have their own flavor? Do they have their own distinct and unique haunted houses and scare zones?
Yeah, because
what's the
Hollywood
sauce?
does it. I know that for sure. Apparently Japan does it as well.
So Hollywood is definitely more steeped in the IP tradition, I would say. They lean more, they have way fewer houses, so they typically have fewer originals. And they don't really do the icon stuff, which I think is a missed opportunity. In the parks abroad, there are definitely, I think Jack has actually made it over to a couple of them. I believe in Japan, he maybe made an appearance. Oh no, it was the director, and it was in Singapore.
Wow.
Singapore also has their own icons, and I believe Japan actually does too. They're newer events, and so they kind of have learned from what Florida has done, and they're like, hey, icons. But what I think is really, really interesting, especially about Singapore, is they always do one haunt every single year that's based on folklore from Asia, anywhere in Asia. So there's one house that they did where there are basically paper houses that you build as tributes to the dead.
Yeah.
And you are walking through one. They have recreated it life size, and it is being burnt as you are in it.
Oh, wow.
So that was the theme of it. And so they're definitely more on that aspect, and they lean way more into the cultural mainstays there. They don't really do the IP houses quite so much.
That sounds awesome.
Right?
Oh my gosh.
For reference, Japan's houses this year are Street Zombies, Biohazard the Extreme, which is Resident Evil.
Yes.
Yeah.
Universal Monsters Legends of Fear, Cult of Chucky, Chucky's Hospital Ward of Madness, Zombie to Dance, Sherlock Holmes, The Curse of the Rose Sword, and Rat-a-Tat plus Hollywood Dream The Ride.
Oh, I want to do the Sherlock Holmes one.
Yeah,
that sounds
great.
cool.
Zombie to dance? Is it a zombie pop idol?
The icon I'm seeing here is literally looks like a bunch of zombies and someone just having the time of their life dancing in front of them. So,
Amazing.
I'm in. Let's go to Japan.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Are there any houses that you like are on your like pie in the sky? Like, I wish they would make this. Like, you're a horror fan.
Yeah.
It sounds like. So, is there anything that you've always wanted to see?
I have one IP one, and this is totally, I know everybody says the ending of this movie is terrible, but Signs was the first horror movie that ever
Yes.
scared me.
Okay.
Ever.
What was terrible about the end of that movie?
It's the CGI. People get caught up on it. I loved it. As a kid, there's so much you could do with the cornfields
Yes.
that you could do with the cupboard. Like there are so
Figures
many
under the door. Yeah.
so many scenes, having the TV with the like still figure as a distraction while somebody else pops out at you. I mean, I think that it would be really
You just have
fun.
Joaquin Phoenix hanging out with a bat.
And Joaquin
Exactly.
Phoenix alone is scary enough. I would love to see them do something with Nope.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah.
exactly how they would do it,
Yeah.
but that was
Well, we
Well, they
talked-
have the backlot.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
added it to that.
They have Jupiter's Claim out in Hollywood, where they actually have like a little bit.
Oh,
where,
right, you mentioned that, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, watching it is kind of like it's just some sort of scary noises. They don't really do a whole lot with it, but yeah, they did a Us house, right?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
oh,
That
did they
was
really?
Probably
Yeah.
freaky as
Yeah,
hell,
that-
man.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's got to be a lot of work to go and find doppelgangers for everybody that goes
Right.
to the.
Yeah. They
Take
did a
photos of
lot
you.
of mannequins in
Oh,
that
okay,
one,
that makes
where it
sense.
was like you don't know if they're a mannequin or if they're a person.
that's freaky.
So,
The worst. I have like 1,000. I have Oculus. That's the one with the mirror.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh no, is that the name of it?
Yeah, Oculus,
Okay,
yeah.
And then I would also love Poltergeist. I think that would
They
be
did
awesome.
that one,
I-
and you
I
actually
missed
you
it.
walk in through the swimming pool.
No way.
Yes.
Oh, that's
Really?
awesome.
Yeah.
So cool.
Oh, that's cool. They didn't move the body. bodies, Jeff. They just moved the headstones.
And then I would love to do like something maybe more like lighthearted. So I would kill for like A Nightmare Before Christmas or like a Coraline house. So like seeing all of the like stop motion, but being real like life, maybe cell shaded on things would be so awesome.
Coraline would be cool.
Okay, you know what, Jeff? You might be the only person who knows this movie, but like a Fire in the Sky movie.
Oh my God.
that,
Aliens
like,
have always
too
freaked
scary.
me out.
Yeah,
oh
too
my God.
scary.
Like you start in the forest and you end up getting like taken to a ship. Like, that would be so cool. Man, Alien Abduction. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I like Alien Abduction.
Have you seen Fire in the Sky?
I have not.
Oh, it's freaky.
I'm going to watch it this weekend.
It's based on a true story, I believe.
Yeah, it is based on a true story.
Stop. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
It is based on an account from a person. Yes.
So
who knows how true it is? But
man,
DB Sweeney, right? Wasn't DB Sweeney in that?
God, I haven't seen it in ages.
Yeah.
Ben, look it up. Was DB Sweeney in Fire in the Sky?
I need to know.
We need to know.
Ben Lexa. So
I'd also love a Mothman house. I love cryptids,
That's
and
a
I just
great
feel
idea.
like they could do a good spin on it. Because if they can make the Tooth Fairy scary, they can make anything
certainly
scary.
That's true. And they do have the Chupacabra this year, which is
Yes.
kind of sort of a. I mean, that is a cryptid.
It is a cryptid, yeah.
From the crypt.
So we got to get our red web friends out to talk about that.
Yeah.
We should do that. As a matter of fact, I think we're doing it next week.
What?
Teaser for next episode.
You know, we tried to do a Chupacabra thing, but it never materialized.
No.
Yeah, there was when we did a not to get off topic, but we did a ghost hunting show for 2 seasons where we went around the world and hunted for ghosts. And we're very good at it and found lots of compelling data.
They're not real.
Turns out they were. Turns out they are real, and Jack's just a dummy. But my initial pitch for the show, when I pitched it to the company to get the funding for it, was that we just take Gavin and we in his underwear and we put him in a field in South Texas and we cover him in pig's blood and we just film it to see if a chupacabra comes. And we never got to do that.
I mean, you can still make that happen.
I'd love to.
Yeah, it's just like snipe hunting.
That's how I
Here,
sold.
Chupacabra.
That's
Here,
how I.
Chupacabra.
That is how I sold the
Chupy.
show internally, and then we that and Bury Gavin alive, and we never got to. We got to do one.
We buried Gavin alive. That was fun.
Oh, God.
Man. So what house are you most excited for this year, either from a narrative standpoint or just in general?
God. Well, Spirits of the Coven, like that is just, it's everything I like. It's witches, it's 1920s. Bugs eaten alive, conceptually, they've never done anything like that before, and I need to see how they make it happen. Because it's also like the
Like, you're excited about
1950s
it?
House of the Future kind of thing gone wrong, and I always love those.
That's great. Anytime you have X gone wrong, it's always a blast.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, let's take this happy thing, gone wrong. It's like, that'll be a good time. That'll be a good time.
Yeah, it's like the horror version of Gone Wild. Like, gone wrong.
Man. Well, I'm very, very excited for this year's Halloween Horror Nights. And so what if someone's going to Halloween Horror Nights for the first time this year, what is some stuff they can look into to see how it connects to previous stuff? Like, is there anything they can keep? I mean, obviously Boris Schuster, like, you go check out the window and everything in the Kitty Cat Club, but is there anything maybe at the park or in the houses they should be looking for that might harken back to some of the older stuff?
I don't know about the houses, to be honest. Because usually, like, if there's a house that's set in Cary, Ohio, which is another thing that pops up constantly throughout, right? Like they usually say that in the description. So that's what I would usually have people look into.
Okay.
But in the scare zones, I think there's going to be a lot of older props and kind of costumes because a lot of them are themes that they've used in the past. Like Wicked Growth is pumpkins. Horrors of Halloween is going to feature a lot of pumpkins, all of that good stuff. So I'm not actually super sure how the lore is going to tie in this year, but I desperately want people to do recaps and blog posts on the Behind the Scrapes tour and tell me everything that I've missed. Like that's my goal.
And it will tie in. We know that it will tie in. That's the cool thing. You mentioned Cary, Ohio. I remember when we did our RIP tour, we got like a little explanation of the history and of the tie to Cary, Ohio.
Well, there was Welcome to Scary, I think was the name of the house last
Horror
year.
in the Heartland.
Yeah.
And as a Midwesterner, I'm just like...
And so that was something where one of the designers was from Ohio, right? They were from some like sort of Midwest kind of small town, and they sort of just started developing houses around this. I don't know, is Cary a real place or is that?
It is.
Okay.
And it actually started before Cary. There was the Willamette Valley, which is where the caretaker's house was. And
in Ohio?
Cary, Ohio is in Willamette Valley.
And the eclipses, like what's next? Oh my gosh.
And they just needed a small town that weird stuff could plausibly happen in. And she said, well, I'm from Cary, Ohio, so let's use Cary. And so it's appeared over and over and over again. And it even crosses over with Legendary Truth because the Wyandotte estate is where the Spirit Seekers, which only appeared in one Halloween Horror Nights, all went missing. They were like, this is our first investigation. It's going to be amazing. And it was for people walking through the house, but maybe not for them. They disappeared completely afterwards. So the Spirit Speakers division of Legendary Truth is no more, but the Wyandotte estate is in Wyandotte County, which is where Cary, Ohio is.
Now, one last thing. I know back in 2005, they did an ARG, so it's an altered reality game, augmented reality game.
I think it's alternate. Is it?
Alternate reality game is the first thing that pops up.
Yeah.
Alternate reality game. So basically, it's like they did stuff on the website, and they did stuff. They just told a story. It was like a game where if you were paying attention, if you went to the website, clicked on certain things, it would take you to new areas.
Okay.
And the way it worked was, the way it worked
Sort of.
was there was all this hidden stuff, and if you followed the clues, it would lead to something. And then what they did for 2005 they actually had a location to go to at a certain time. And what happened when people went there was they basically took these people and they gave them robes, and they got to be part of the opening of Halloween Horror Nights.
Awesome.
So they had like people dressed up like monks, and all of those people were the people who completed the ARG, which is such an awesome way to do it. I don't know what else happened to them, but I think
nobody does. They were never seen again. Actually,
the Terror Queen needed her sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, like stuff like that I feel like they've been doing stuff like that. Have you been a part of any of that, or have you followed any of that stuff?
No, because a lot of what happens in the ARGs, like I clicked through the websites, I would look at the forums, but ultimately it all culminated in the park.
Okay.
Because a lot of it was actually test beds for new technologies within the park. So they did a huge thing where you scanned RFID chips, like you got a Legendary Truth badge that you'd have in the park, and they'd have stations where you could scan it, and then things would happen and you could earn points. In 22, they had this whole faction thing where that's like the super deep lore. You'd probably need like another 2-hour podcast to talk about, where there were all these different legions that represented the different types of monsters, and you could pick a legion and earn points for them. And if you participated enough in some of these, one year, they actually brought you in to do a VR experience to test out VR for the park.
Oh, wow.
So not only is it a really cool thing for people who are fans to partake in, it's amazing market research for the biggest fans of the event that you have going.
So what did we miss last year? Do you know what happened last year for that kind of stuff? Or were they still kind of, because of COVID, sort of not doing it full bore?
I think probably because of COVID, they weren't really doing it as much. And I think also it's just a lot harder to do now because Flash is dead. So a lot of the websites that they would have aren't really a thing. And they have corporate overlords who are a little more stringent about what websites look like. And then I think there's a huge opportunity with Discord, but that requires a lot of community management, obviously. So I think it might be a little while before we see them step their toes back in as kind of technologies and times have changed.
Yeah, it certainly feels like Halloween Horror Nights has always been like the forerunner for everyone else. Like it seems like all these other groups that do sort of scary stuff have been looking at Universal and how they pulled it off. And so, man, I'm excited for the future of Halloween Horror Nights because we have Epic Universe opening up in a couple of years, and it's a question of like maybe do they move it down there to this new park? I've heard rumors that they might do it across both like Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure again, like really just expand it, make it bigger. There's so many cool things coming up, and I think this upcoming decade is going to be a good year for haunt fans.
Jack, you're making me feel old. Okay,
oh, please. Okay, so as a final recap, what is the survey of the lore of Halloween Horror Nights? What should people keep their eyes open for if they go visit the park this year?
Yes. So I think there will probably be nods to the icons here and there. And by icons, I'm talking, Jack, the director, the storyteller, the usher, maybe even some of the hidden icons or the lost icons like Cindy or Eddie. Cary, Ohio, if it doesn't make an appearance, I'm going to be very surprised. It's appeared in so many of them before. And then in general, the Legendary Truth. I mean, they're a big investigative force and they're a huge banner for the fandom itself. So I can imagine that Legendary Truth, Boris Schuster, and some wonderful investigative kind of nonsense is going to be happening.
And of course, keep an eye out for Lil Boo as well.
Oh, yes, Lil Boo. The greatest icon in my heart for Halloween Horror Nights.
Jeff, are you ready to go back to Florida and go to Halloween Horror Nights 31?
Yeah, I told you, dude, after last year, irrespective of this podcast, I'll go every year.
Yeah, we gotta
schedule depending, obviously.
We gotta schedule our trip. I mean, so
do.
Halloween Horror Nights goes up until I think October 31st this year. I think it ends on the 31st. Usually, like they maybe give you a day or two in November, but I think it ends on the 31st. So yeah, we gotta plan our trip. And so, Mallie, we'd love to have you back at some point. Maybe talk about next year's experience, or what we saw, and kind of you could explain what the heck we were looking at.
I love it.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for listening. Thank you again, Mallie, for joining us today. And so, this is the portion of the episode where I ask you a question of the audience, and then you guys answer during our live stream. Speaking of which, our next live stream is the 14th of September. So go over to roosterteeth.com or youtube.com/annualpass. Watch our live stream on the 14th of September. It's at 2 p.m. Central Time until about 4 p.m. I'm still working on my Lego.
I've made tremendous progress on the puzzle last time. We'll continue. Yeah.
And so Beaks, you'll be there. Hopefully, maybe we'll see. And
I'll help.
You can get on the laptop, answer questions.
Puzzle.
You'll help with the puzzle?
Yeah, not the Legos.
I could use the help. That'd be great.
I'll just sort the pieces.
Okay.
So we ask you, and then we go through all the questions we've asked the previous episodes, and we pick some winners, and we send you an autographed theme park map. And my question for you this time, we may have asked this last year when we did Halloween Horror Nights, but what Halloween Horror Nights house do you want to see? What is your either IP-based or original one? Explain to us what your ideal Halloween Horror Nights house, if you had whatever, any budget, doesn't matter, your heart's content or heart's extent, I don't know, whatever. Let us know what your Halloween Horror Nights would be, Halloween Horror Nights house would be in the future.
You're killing it right now.
I'm falling apart.
You're doing a great job.
I'm so excited to go back out and check out Halloween Horror Nights. So, and then go over to roosterteeth.com, answer in the comments of this episode, and we'll go through during our live stream and pick some winners and send you guys a park map. So, that's going to do it for us today. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media stuff, annual_pass over on Twitter and on Instagram, and we are Annual Pass Pod over on TikTok. Again, we got a bunch of new stuff coming out soon. We've got some new merchandise, store.roosterteeth.com. Pick up a shirt. We got all of our spooky shirts coming out. It's spooky times for, we're coming into October. They have Christmas stuff at Costco right now.
What?
Already.
Yeah.
They have Christmas trees at Costco right now.
It is September.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. We're not getting into Christmas stuff for a while, but we're gonna focus on the spooky for the next couple of months.
Mallie, do you have any social media or anything you'd like to promote on your way out?
Yeah, I'm not super active on Twitter, but you can find me at MALLIEFE, the number 2, the letter O, the number 3. That's my Twitter.
Rolls
and
off the tongue.
Tweet about horror stuff. Yeah.
I imagine if people are watching this episode right now and going there, they're probably looking at you responding to all the Halloween Horror Night stuff coming out at this point. So that's
I gotta get more active on there just to participate a little bit more.
We gotta find one of those records. I want one of those records.
Oh
that's all I want.
Yeah, you really excited Jack with that.
Yeah, I heard that.
Our Jack, not the clown Jack. Our Jack's a bit of a clown too, but in a different way.
I'm sure Jack the Clown is pretty excited about Halloween Horror Nights.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, do you feel like you learned anything today?
I do.
BK, do you feel like you learned anything today?
Yes.
Yes. I love
Jack,
you guys.
did you learn anything today?
Yeah,
Always.
what did you learn?
Always. I learned about the lantern. I did learn about the
legendary
Yeah, we all learned about the lantern. Why are you bragging about it?
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. We love you again. Please tell your friends about Annual Pass. Spread the word, spread the love. We're trying to grow this podcast as much as we possibly can. Watch us over youtube.com/annualpass. We love you. Stay safe and have a happy Halloween Horror Nights. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.